Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Microstructure Exchange. Today we have Vincent Maurin from HEC Paris, who will talk about dealers as record keepers. Just housekeeping items. As usual, the aim is that the seminar goes until noon. Vincent agrees to take questions as we go along, and he will probably have a short break between at various spots where we can collect maybe some questions. But other than that, Vincent, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
All right. Thank you very much, Andreas, and thank you, Josh, and also Andre for setting this up. We're very happy with John to be able to present this work. It's early work, but we think it's kind of the best audience to get feedback on this. And so, as Andreas said, I will make a pause at some point, but please interrupt me if you have any questions, especially clarifying questions. All right. So the motivation I think should be pretty obvious for most of you. As you know, the markets for many assets, swaps, bond derivatives typically trade over the counter, which means that prices are determined on a bilateral basis. And we often view OTC markets as kind of inefficient. There's a lot of opacity, there's price dispersion, and for example, the same asset trades at different price in different trades at the same time. And probably because of this, at least since the Great Financial Crisis, we have seen developments to try to increase competition and transparency in these markets. And I'm talking both about developments on the technological side and also on the regulatory side. So on the technological side, now we know that to trade corporate bonds, for example, we can go on electronic platforms when we can run auctions. So it can be RFM, RFQ, all-to-all trading that really facilitates the search for counterparties. On the regulatory side, on the one hand, we have reforms that promote the use of this type of facilities, of this type of platforms where you have more competition. And at the same time, we also have initiatives to increase post-trade transparency, such as trace for corporate bonds. Okay. And so what we're saying is that despite this changing landscape in OTC markets, one thing that still seems to be key today are relationships, right? Relationships between clients and dealers in particular. So what we see is that even in these modern electronic markets, we see that relationships still seem to matter quite a bit. How do we see that? Well, this is just one paper from a former HEC student, Marcus Backensen. And what they show is that if you look at RFQs, for example, clients solicit few quotes, so that we know. But they also tend to trade with the same dealers across auctions. And so what we take from this is that these relationships in OTC markets seem to be pretty valuable for clients. And so when we move towards a more competitive and a more transparent landscape, we want to make sure that we can preserve this value from relationships. And what we're also going to say is that maybe opacity and price dispersion, which are seen as negative things, we can actually shed a positive light on these things once we think about relationships. So I'm going to tell you what we do in this paper in a quite abstract way. That's on purpose. And then when I move to the next slide about implications, I'm going to be a bit more concrete about the real world implications. So we want to model a relationship between clients and dealers. So we're going to have a model based on Glost and Milgrom. The key difference is that the client will not be anonymous, right? And if you're not anonymous, you can interact repeatedly with the same dealer. And what it will do in our paper is that the dealer will learn the client's trading motives over time. So whether the client is trading for liquidity reasons or whether the client is trading on information. And so basically what will happen is that the client will have some kind of trading record, right, with the dealer. And so the dealer will discriminate, so set different prices depending on this trading record. And what we're going to show is that this form of price discrimination would actually benefit what we call liquidity-driven clients, so clients that do not trade on information. So at this stage, we kind of have a theory of trading records. So where does the relationship fit in? Well, we're going to say that trading with dealers in a relationship is going to be an optimal way for clients to keep their record private. So to maintain the privacy of their trading record in order to extract all these benefits from price discrimination. Okay. So as I promised, this is a bit abstract, but now I'm going to get to the implication and to tell you what we can learn from this theory of relationship in which dealers, optimally keep the record of their clients private, which is why we call the paper Dealers as Record Keepers. So we have two broad set of implications. So here I just put the main ones. The first set of implications is about trading patterns and prices. If you want, this is a bit of a sanity check on the model. And then I'm going to move to implications about trading protocols and regulation. So about trading patterns and prices, so of course, what our model would generate is that it can explain why relationships persist even as over-the-counter trading becomes more competitive. So even as you have these platforms where you can do this RFQ, where competition is just a click away, a relationship will still matter. The second thing is that price dispersion or price discrimination, if you wish, which is often seen as a negative thing. It's a way to measure, for example, dealers' market power in the data. In fact, in our model, it will actually be a benefit for liquidity-driven clients, right? So this is something that will increase their utility. We're also going to argue that we get price discounts that are somewhat consistent with what has been found in the data, the fact that clients get price discounts if they trade more with the same dealers. Okay. So what about trading protocols and regulation? In a sense, through the lens of our model, we can assess these two through the following angle. We're going to say, well, to what extent does a trading protocol or regulation allows clients to keep their record really private? So let me give you a first example. We're going to argue that the request for market protocol dominates the request for quote protocol. So as you might know, in a request for quote protocol, you go on the platform, you say either I want to buy this asset, or you say I want to sell this asset. And in doing that, you basically reveal your trading directions, so your trading intention, not only to the winning dealer, but also to all the losing dealers in the auction. And it's not that hard if these dealers know your trading intention, your trading direction, to eventually reconstruct your trading record. So whether you make a gain or a loss on that trade. And so one simple way to avoid that is to have a two-sided request in a RFM protocol, where basically you don't say whether you want to buy or to sell, and only the winning dealer knows that. So Josh is here, so I know that Josh also has a paper about this. So I'm going to come to that in a minute. It's just a different mechanism in a sense. What can we say about post-trade transparency? Well, of course, post-trade transparency can be good. We're not saying otherwise, but post-trade transparency can hurt to the extent that it helps market participants to reconstruct the trading record of clients. So the example I have in mind is the following. Suppose you try to trade an illiquid asset, so high yield bond that doesn't trade very frequently, and you contact a few dealers to try to trade it. Well, it's not going to be that hard for these dealers to try to reconstruct your trading record as a customer from trace data, just because these bonds do not trade very often. You don't see who is the customer, but if this customer has contacted you before and you get a timestamp of the trade, that will help you reconstruct the trading record. So basically what we're saying is that post-trade transparency, especially in markets where it seems like it's very useful, so markets for illiquid assets, can actually hurt again to the extent that it makes the trading record of customers a bit more public. Okay. I'm going to move to the literature review, and then I'm going to pause in case there's any question, but so just bear with me on this slide. I'm not going to talk about all these strands of literature literature that we talk here. I just want to mention that we're not the first one, of course, to talk about trading relationship in non-anonymous market. There's a tradition of papers that does that. I think what we bring here to the table is this discussion about the privacy of the trading records, and that's really from that point that we get most of our novel implications about trading protocols and regulation. And as I mentioned, if you think more narrowly about RFQ versus RFM auctions, there's been a couple of papers on that, including a paper by Josh. We also have a mechanism that says that RFM kind of dominates RFQ, which is not about front running. This is just a different mechanism, but we get a similar result. So before I move forward, let me pause here to see if there's any question.
So I see nothing in the chat.
Okay,
I
so that's
I have none. So
okay. So I don't know if it's good or bad, but then I'm going to move on. And if there's anything that that's not clear and that you want to come back to the introduction at some point, let me know. Okay, Chao Jun, I see that Chao Jun has a question.
RFQ versus
Yeah.
RFM is a main result of the paper. What do you think about the fact that on these platforms, that the RFM is not really being used.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So it's kind of hard to get data about this. So I think the latest data that I've seen is that electronic trading now is closer to 30% of all trading. But within electronic trading, it's hard to get data on RFQ versus RFM. It's true that RFM is not a huge share of the market, but it's growing very fast. And of course, in practice, there are some obstacles to having this RFM, which is that if you're a dealer in a RFM, you must provide a bid and an ask, so you must be able to do both sides of the trade, which is kind of sometimes a bit of a limitation. So we cannot speak to that in the model, but we do acknowledge this practical limitation, right?
Thanks.
Could there
Yeah.
be kind of selection between the RFM and the RFQ depending on whether the trader is information motivated?
That's a very good point. So in a way, you're going to see that in our model, the information motivated client will do exactly what the liquidity motivated client wants to do, because they want to pool with that client, because otherwise they have no gains from trade, so they're not going to be able to trade it. I guess in a richer model you could have some kind of selection like this, but essentially in our model you're going to see that there's one type of format that is preferred by the liquidity driven client, and the information driven client will have no choice but to follow suit, right? But that's I guess you could have that if you extend a bit the model. That's a good point.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. All right, so if there's no more question, let me move on to the model. That's a fairly simple model, we would argue, which I guess can be both good and bad. You will tell me. So as I said, it's kind of a Gloucester-Milgram without anonymity. So there's going to be 3 dates. There's no discounting. Everybody's risk neutral. You're going to have one consumption good, so just think about cash that's going to be used to pay for the asset. And one asset that has a final payoff V3 that pays at date 3. And this V3 is the sum of 2 innovations, epsilon 2 and epsilon 3. These innovations are RID, and epsilon t can take value either sigma or 1 or minus sigma with equal probability. And this innovation is publicly observed at date t. Okay. Now, what about clients? So we're going to call customers clients here. The client can either be a hedger with probability 1 minus mu, or a speculator with probability mu. And this client may want to trade 1 unit both at date 1 and at date 2. So there's going to be repeated trading. The speculator is just your run-of-the-mill speculator in Gloucester-Milgram. She's going to be privately informed about the innovation 1 period ahead. So date speculator knows already epsilon 2 at date 1. Okay, so that's a very standard. The hedger, you can think about her as the typical liquidity trader, in the sense that she has either desire to buy or to sell 1 unit of the asset with equal probability. This desire will be IID across time. So one period I may want to buy, the other period I may want to sell. The difference is that the hedger here is going to be rational, so she's going to care about her financial payoff, right? But she's also going to get a private benefit from trading the asset. So this private benefit, we see it as a reduced form hedging need, which is why we call this trader the hedger. And so essentially what this private benefit tells you, this BH, is basically the maximum loss that this trader can tolerate. Okay, this is just a way to generate gains from trade while still having rational traders. What about liquidity supply? It's going to be done by perfectly competitive dealers that can provide liquidity for this 1 unit trade at date 1 and date 2. One important feature is that if you take any given dealer at date 1, this dealer can become unavailable at date 2 with probability Q. Okay, so what does it mean? Well, think about, I have some inventory considerations that are not modeled here. And so, I would like to supply liquidity, but I just can't, right? So I'm not going to be able to do it at day 2 with some probability Q. You're going to see that this Q is going to be quite useful for us, because if we take Q to the limit where it's equal to 1, it means that no one that is around at date 1 is around at date 2. And then you basically don't have any relationship, so you just have spot trading. So that's going to be a useful benchmark for us. If you push the interpretation a bit more, you could say that if you increase Q, basically liquidity supply is not done anymore by traditional dealers that can form relationship. It's done more by short-term traders, high-frequency firms that are supplying liquidity, but that do not form relationships. Okay. So that's the basic setup. Now I want to tell you about the trading record. So how do we think about that? The client will trade both at date 1 and at date 2. Okay, so the record will be the performance of the client's trade at date one, either a gain or a loss. So suppose you buy at date one, right? And then the innovation is positive, right? So the asset value goes up, which means that you actually make a financial gain on the trade, and then your record is Chi. If instead you buy that one, but the innovation is negative, then you make a loss and your record is L. Okay. So the trading record is going to be useful, as you will see, because it's ultimately going to be a signal about the type of the client, whether the client is more likely to be a hedger or a speculator. And that, of course, can affect pricing at date two. Now, what about this trading record? So let me tell you how we think about it in the theory and how we think it relates to what happens in practice. So in the model, the trading record can be either private or public. If it's private, your trading record is observed by you, of course, as a client, and also with the dealer that you traded with at date one, right? Because this dealer is on the other side of the trade. So of course, they will know as well. In the public case, we assume that the record is observable to everybody at date two, so to all the dealers. Okay, now you will tell me, well, there's no trading protocol in practice where the trading record is public, and I will agree with that. What we think we can capture is that the fact that in practice, different trading protocols exhibit different degrees of effective disclosure of the trading record. So let me be a bit more clear about this. Again, if you do a request for quote, you basically say whether you want to buy or to sell, right? So you reveal your trading direction, not only to the winning dealer of the auction, but to all participating dealers, right? So these participating dealers, they know which direction you trade, they can observe the price movements of the asset, so they can basically reconstruct your trading record. So in that case, the trading record is public among all the people who participate in the auction. If you do a request for market, which is a two-sided request, you say, I'm not telling you whether I want to buy or to sell, I want you to give me both a bid and an ask, right? Then of course the winning dealer will know whether you buy or sell, but the other dealers will not know it. So in this case, you can maintain the privacy of your trading record, right? So again, this is a bit why we think that this private versus public trading record can be relevant to speak about actual trading protocols. So last slide about the model, and then I'm gonna pause again in case there's any question. So how will trade work here? So remember that the client might want to trade one unit both at date one and one unit at date two. So in the model, the dealers will offer contracts for these trades at date one and date two. So the dealer will say, here's my price for date one trade and it's my price for the date two trade. What we think it captures in practice is that this is an implicit promise of the dealer, which says that, you know, if you trade with me today and you trade again with me in the future, you might get better price in the future, right? So here it's an explicit contract, but you know, in reality, it's a bit more implicit. So what is a contract? A contract will be a set of R spreads, S, right? So basically, the dealer says, this is going to be my bid and my ask for date one and my bid and my ask for date two, but it's enough to think in terms of R spread. What is the R spread? This is the difference between the price that you quote and the midpoint. And in our model, the midpoint will simply be the publicly expected value of the asset. So basically what you can expect the asset to pay, conditional on public information. So at date T, the client will buy at the ask, which is VT plus the R spread, and will sell at the bid, which is VT minus the R spread. Okay, and this is just because of the symmetry of the model. And what you see as well is that at day two, the R spread, which I'm going to call spread for now to simplify, can be contingent on the record of the client, right? I'm the dealer trading with the client. I know whether he or she made a loss on the date one trade, and so I can give her personalized quotes at date two. So this is in this sense that you can get some price discrimination in our model. Some assumptions that we need to make. We're going to assume that the client cannot commit to this contract. So, you know, the client will be kind of free to walk away at date two if they don't like these trades. We're going to assume that the dealer can commit, unless, of course, the dealer becomes unavailable, which happens with probability Q. The second assumption we make, which this one we can really relax easily, is that adverse selection will be mild in the following sense. So mu here is the probability that the client is a speculator. So that's a measure of adverse selection. And what is BH over sigma? Well, BH is the prime benefit of the hedger. So that basically tells you how much gains from trade you have in this market. And sigma is the common value component of the asset, which is also the information advantage of the speculator. So basically, if BH over sigma is large, it means that the hedger wants to trade so much that you don't care too much about adverse selection, right? So mu being lower than that means that adverse selection is mild. We have some robustness in the paper, and I'm happy to discuss it if anyone has a question about this. Okay. So again, before I start with the analysis, let me ask if there's any question about the model.
Yeah, I have one question. Just on what you were
Sure.
talking about just now, if you go back, I, I think you talked, there are two inequalities here in assumption two. I think when you talked about adverse selection being mild, I think you were talking about just the first inequality, but what's going on with the second inequality, or did I
Yeah.
miss something?
Good question, Josh. You caught me. So I forgot to say that this one at this stage is not very clear what it means. You're going to see exactly what it means in 2 slides. Basically, you're going to see that it's going to be necessary to generate some action, but I think it's better to talk about it when it actually comes up. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks.
A quick question now, like kind of seeing a little bit more. Can you kind of help me with the intuition for like why? So here the dealer's trying to understand whether the investor is an informed type. Like the information is like at the information at the investor level rather than
Yes.
say at the trade level or something like that. Like what's kind of the intuition for that? Do we, would it be, I mean, I guess I would normally think of, trying to figure out whether a particular trade or trader is kind of informed as opposed to, an investor. Yeah. Could you help
Yeah.
me think about that and whether this kind of extends to that kind of thing?
No, so that's a good point. So I guess here, like, we have fixed types of traders. So basically, if you figure out whether a trade was likely to be informed or not, you also figure out whether the trader that did the trade was likely to be informed or not. So we didn't do it. I think it would change a bit if basically the type of the trader could change over time. So maybe like one period you're more likely to be liquidity driven, the other period you're more likely to speculate on information. I guess here you would want to learn both about maybe the underlying type of the client and maybe the current type, which is basically whether the trade is informationally driven or not. So the short answer to the question is that yeah, there's no distinction as in this version of this model, but of course you could have that. There's a paper by my colleague Thierry Foucault about relationship trading where the type of the trader can basically fluctuate. Sometimes you trade on private benefits, sometimes you trade on information. So that's a good point. It's well taken, but the short answer is that it's the same thing currently in the model. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So let me start with the analysis, and just to simplify, I'm just going to explain what's the role of the trading record here when you don't have a relationship, and then we're going to see what kind of extra value the relationship brings to the table. So the benchmark I'm going to look at is this parameter Q equal to 1. So what does it mean? Q equal to 1 literally means that if you try to have a relationship at date 1, it will always break up. So at day 2, you have to trade with someone else. So it basically means that the only thing you can do here is spot trading, right? You could try to say, look, I'm going to give you good price at day 2, but at day 2 you're not around, so there's no relationship. I'm going to contrast private trading record with public trading record. But if there's no relationship and your record is private, as a client, you're basically the only one to know that record, right? So it is as if you trade anonymously because the dealers at day 2, they don't know whether you made a gain or loss, so they don't have any more information. And here that's very simple because you have a repeated static lost and Milgram model. And so that's why I'm going to tell you exactly what is the competitive spread in this environment. At each date, the competitive spread that the dealers will charge is going to be mu times sigma. Mu is the probability to face a speculator against a measure of adverse selection, and sigma is basically a measure of the information advantage of these speculators. And by the assumption that I flagged, so the one that I actually discussed, this is lower than BH, which means that the hedger are kind of happy to trade at this price. So I think it's almost insulting to show you this, but let me just go through the logic for this, just in case, so that everybody's on the same page. It's symmetric, so you can consider a buy order by the client. The client's buy order will be executed at VT plus ST. VT is the expected value before anything happens in this period, and ST is the R spread charged by the dealer. And so the dealer zero profit condition is the following. If you trade with the hedger probability 1 minus mu, you earn VT plus ST. And what is your conditional expected value? Conditional knowing that you trade with a hedger. Well, this is still VT because the hedger is not informed. If you trade with a speculator, probability mu, now the conditional expected value, knowing that you trade with a speculator, is VT plus sigma because these guys will only buy if the next innovation is sigma. Okay, so you set that to 0 and you find basically this spread. Okay, so that's very standard. Now let's add the trading record to that. So it's a public record now, so which means that at day 2, the dealers will observe whether the clients made a gain or a loss. Okay. So first, at date 1, nothing changes because you don't have information about the client at this stage. There was no trading prior to date 1. And so just as before, you get the spread to be equal to mu sigma. Okay. At day 2, you observe the trading record. And basically what it will change is that it will change the dealer's belief that the client is a speculator. So we denote this belief by mu to R. So 2 is for day 2, R is for the record. Okay. And so basically that's what I said initially, that the trading record is a signal about the type of the client. Here in this extreme version of the model, if I see that the client made a loss, I know for sure that the client is a hedger because the speculator is perfectly informed, they will not make a loss on the trade. If I see that the client makes a gain, it can be either a hedger who got lucky or a speculator, right? But basically what this inequality, what you see here is that this belief, when I see a gain, is much higher. I'm much more likely to face a speculator than before. And that quantity here is exactly the one that Josh was mentioning before. We're basically assuming here that in that state of the world, if I see that my client made a gain, adverse selection is too strong. I'm too likely to face a speculator, and hence there's not going to be a trade. That's what this thing is telling you. And so that's what we get with the public record and the spot trading. So there's not yet a relationship. The spread at day 2, if the client makes a loss, is equal to 0. And the spread at day 2, if the client made a gain, is equal to sigma, which is just a way to say that there's no trade. Basically, it's equal to the value of the speculator. And so in particular, what happens here is that the hedger that has a record of G, so this is the liquidity-driven client that just happens to make a gain, this client cannot trade. Okay. So maybe at this stage, I think it's obvious for many people. I just want to spend one slide on the trading record before I move to relationship trading. So making the trading record public in this case, it benefits the hedger and it hurts the speculator. So why is that? Because as a hedger, you're more likely to make a loss, right? Because you're not informed while the speculator is informed. And when traders make a loss, dealers face low adverse selection and they charge a low spread. In this case, it's even a spread of 0. The speculator in the other end is more likely to get a gain record. In fact, they only get a gain record. In this case, adverse selection is high and the dealers charge a high spread. Okay. So that's the benefit of the public record. What's the cost of a public record for the hedger is that the hedger does not get to trade when its record is G because adverse selection is too high. What you can show now is that the hedger will still benefit overall from this public record. Basically, getting a much better price when I get a loss record kind of dominates the fact of not being able to trade when I get a gain record. Okay. Now, something you have to check here when you do this analysis is, of course, you have to check that the speculator doesn't want to manipulate the record in equilibrium, right? As a speculator, I get a signal that the asset value is high. I should buy, but maybe I want to sell because if I sell, now I get a record R equal to L, in which case I know I'm going to get a low spread at date 2. Well, you can show that actually this payoff for manipulation, or at least the net payoff for manipulating relative to the equilibrium payoff US star is actually negative, right? The key is that, well, if I manipulate my record, it's costly for me because I kind of have to make a loss at the first date. I have to trade against my signal. That's a net loss of 2 sigma. And the best I can get is an improvement in spread at day 2, which is just equal to sigma. Okay. The reason I'm mentioning this incentives to manipulate here, even if it's not directly relevant, is because it's going to become relevant when we move, to relationship trading. Okay. So let me now get to the main result of the paper, which is about relationship trading and trading records. Okay. So basically what we do now is we say, well, your relationship with the dealer might break up with probability Q, but it doesn't always break up. So you can form a relationship. Again, let me remind you that dealers compete for the client's business with contracts which specify half spread at date 1 and at date 2, depending on your record. we're going to call relationship dealer the dealer selected at date one, and outside dealers, all the other dealers that are not selected at date one. Why are they relevant? Well, for two reasons. First, as a client, my relationship can break up at day two, so I might have to trade with somebody else. Second, I might want to trade with somebody else, because clients have limited commitment. Maybe at day two, they want to jump ship and trade with somebody else. So here, to characterize the equilibrium contract, we're going to use a result for which the details are in the paper, so I'm not going to bore you with this today unless you have questions. So we basically solve for the competitive equilibrium, right? And here we have a screening game because the type of the client is unknown to the dealers. And what we show is that in this game, the competitive equilibrium will actually implement the best pooling contract from the point of view of the hedger. So think of a contract that is accepted both by the hedger and the speculator. And that's the best contract from the point of view of the hedger. Okay. Again, details are in the paper. I'm not going to spend time on this today, but if you have any question, let me know. It helps us quite a bit because basically what we want to solve for is an equilibrium contract, but we can solve for this equilibrium contract as the solution of a constraint optimization problem. And this constraint optimization problem is the following. We're going to maximize the hedger utility subject to two constraints. Of course, the fact that the relationship dealers breaks even, right, on this contract here, and also to the contract that the constraint, that the speculator does not manipulate a trading record, right? And you will see why this plays a role. Okay. So now what we ask is, okay, when relationship trading is possible, how does it modify the equilibrium contract, right, relative to spot trading? And if you want, what is the equilibrium level of record privacy, right? You can think that there can be a public record or private record, but in equilibrium, the level of privacy will be chosen by equilibrium. It will also be the one that is optimal for the hedger. So what we find is that the equilibrium relationship contract, features a private record, right? That's actually optimal for the hedger, and that's what happens in equilibrium. With this contract, the client always trades, even if a relationship breaks up, and any breakup of the relationship is involuntary. So you never leave your relationship because you're not happy. You just, the relationship breaks up because of this shock. Okay. So before I move to the implication, there are two things I need to explain. The first one is, how does a relationship contract improve upon spot trading, right? And the second one is, why is a private trading record optimal for the hedger? And basically, if I answer the first question, it's going to be easier to understand the answer to the second question. So first, let me observe that the fact that a relationship contract improves upon spot trading is obvious, right? Because a spot trading contract, if you want, is just a specific case of a relationship contract, right? So what you can do with spot trading, you can do it in a relationship. So it's obvious that there's an improvement. So the next two slides, what I'm going to focus on is why is a relationship contract better than spot trading? And to do so, I'm going to focus on the simple case in which Q equals 0, which means that the relationship never breaks up, right? This is just for the intuition. Okay, so what can you do with a relationship contract that you cannot do with spot trading? Well, the first thing you can do is that you can optimize the use of the trading record. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Remember that already in the spot trading case, you had price discrimination in the sense that the spread that you face if you make a gain is higher than the spread you face if you make a loss, right? And that we said was a reward for the hedger because the hedger is more likely to make a loss than a gain compared to the speculator, okay? So this price discrimination is a reward for the hedger and a punishment for the speculator. And essentially, in the relationship, you can basically set, if you want, this S2G minus S2L at an optimal level, right? The one that maximizes the utility of the hedger, right? We show that basically, if you don't want the speculator to manipulate, you're going to set the difference in spread equal to sigma, right? Which is going to be larger than what happens under spot trading, right? So again, under spot trading, you already have a mechanism that rewards the hedger, which is this difference in spread. But basically, with the contract, the relationship dealer will allow the hedger to max out on the potential of this trading record. Okay. The second benefit of a relationship contract relative to spot trading is that you can actually, as a hedger, realize gains from trade even if you make a gain, right? So let me try to give you the intuition, starting from the spot trading outcome. So in the spot trading, you have no relationship, so you just trade one period after the other. There's no commitment to future prices. In blue, you have the spot prices, right? And particularly, remember that if at day 2 you have made a gain on the day 1 trade, then the spread is such that the hedger doesn't trade. It's higher than its private benefit. Okay. So now I'm going to look at a paired up contract. And what I want to do with this paired up contract related to spot trading is that at least I want to induce trade by the hedger in state 2G here. Okay. To do that, I have to lower the spread at least to the level of the private benefit of the hedger, right? This is the minimum I need, the maximum I can quote for the hedger to trade. Now, the intuition you could have is the following. The dealer is now making a loss here, right? In that state 2G, because of course that spread is not ex post optimal. So to recoup that loss, it could actually increase the spread in state 2L. But what we show is the optimal thing to do is actually different, right? What you want to do is to lower the spread in state 2L as well, right? And you want to increase the spread at it 1, right? And if you want, the key reason is the following. The hedger is kind of likely to end up in that state 2L. It's kind of likely to make a loss. So you don't want to increase the spread, the trading cost in that state where the hedger is quite likely to go. So instead, you decrease the spread S2L and you increase the spread at date 1 for the dealer to break even. So I'm going to spare you the details here, but essentially what you can do is that you compute the change in spread at date 1 such that the dealer breaks even. And then you show that the hedger can benefit despite this increase in the spread, right? Because the spread has gone down here, okay? So essentially what's going on, we can interpret it like this. The dealer is telling the client, well, I know that if you're a hedger, you would like to trade in that state, but expose once I'm in that state, adverse selection is too strong. So I don't want to do it. So if you really want to trade in that state, you kind of have to pay a bit more upfront, right? And you can view that as some kind of investment in the relationship. Ex ante, you pay a bit more than the competitive spread of mu sigma as a way to guarantee that you can trade in that state 2G.
Is that equilibrium unique? And what ties it down? Because I think once you have this relationship, essentially the dealer can extract all the rents from the hedger, no? I mean,
okay. So here the dealers are perfectly competitive and they can commit to the price. So that's important, right? So at date 1, basically they say, that's my contract. It's S1, S2L, S2G. They compete in contract, so they break even in expectation, right, on this contract. And if you want, we also say that the dealer can commit to this spread S2L and S2G at day 2. Does it answer your question, or?
It does. Okay. Well, right.
Yeah. I mean, to be transparent, I guess I might have wanted to emphasize a bit more. We need commitment on the dealer side. Otherwise, you might have a typical information holdup problem in which you're the only one to have the information. In the paper, we have an extension where we show that you can implement this commitment with collateral, but essentially you need some kind of technology for the dealer to commit, right? Okay, the last slide of the model before I move on to the implication is, why do you want to keep the record private? Well, it has to do with the state of the world when the relationship breaks up. So with some probability Q, the client cannot trade with the relationship dealer that's exogenous, and then they have to turn to an outside dealer, right? And so if your relationship does not break up with probability 1 minus Q, it doesn't matter whether your record is public or private, you're going to trade, right? So basically there's no difference here. Now, suppose your record is public and you have a breakup. Outside dealers, they will observe whether you made a loss or a gain. And if you make a gain, well, expose they don't want to trade, adverse selection is too strong, right? But if your record is private, the outside dealers, they don't know whether you have a loss record or a gain record, right? And so under the assumption that we made, they are willing to trade with you. So you can basically realize your gains from trade all the time. So what the private record does is that it allows for this optimal pricing, this optimal price discrimination within the relationship. But because it's private, it kind of resets your trading record if the relationship breaks up, right? And that's what's good for the client because that allows the client to trade even if for some reason the relationship breaks up. Okay. So basically what we get here is that hedgers or liquidity-driven clients, if you want, they will prefer trading protocols with greater record privacy. And under our equilibrium concept, this is also the kind of trading protocols that will arise in equilibrium. Okay. So let me stop to see if there's any question before I move on to the implications.
So just to clarify, you have really very strong assumptions that you make in terms of privacy of records and or public or being public records. You really need to see not only that there was a trade, but also that who was trading so that you can tell repeat traders. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So that's you're absolutely right. So that's why I say don't view our public record theoretical benchmark as something realistic. What we're just saying is that if you look at different trading protocols, there are different degrees of kind of effective disclosure of this trading record. What we're just saying again, and I'm going to come back to that, is that in RFM compared to RFQ, your trading record is disclosed to less dealers. And if you look at the spectrum between private and public, I'm not saying that any actual trading protocol is at the public level, but if you have a range between the two, like some trading protocols will have greater public trading record and others will have more private trading record. So in that sense, we think we can speak to the mechanism. But your point is well taken that in practice there's no such thing as a public record. That's fair. Yes, Josh.
And in addition, if I may, sorry, just one follow-up. Sorry,
Yes,
Josh.
sorry. Yeah.
But it's also important that the breakup is also not known, right? So I mean, initially you're motivated by saying that the dealer is not in business anymore or something of that nature. So that is something which is also would be known. I mean, even if there's changes in the willingness for a dealer to participate in markets, that would be normally that's more likely to be publicly known than the record, right?
Yes, that's true. But so that actually, I'm speaking under the control of John here, but I think that that's not an issue for us because essentially here the only clients who leave their relationship dealer are those for which the dealer is not available. So you don't have any inference to make, between those clients who might have left because they were not happy and those clients who left because their dealer couldn't trade, right? So in a sense, I don't think you can observe the breakup. That's actually fine. This is not a concern for us.
Well, okay, fine.
Okay. Yeah. I think Josh was first. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. So like regarding this question on this slide of why keep the record private, I think maybe there's something that I'm not quite fully understanding. So I might have imagined that maybe there's some equilibrium in which if I'm an uninformed hedger, I would actually want my record to be public because that's kind of a signal that I'm sending to the market that says, hey, I'm uninformed. If I were informed, I would not want my record to be public. So an informed guy would never agree to have a public record. Therefore, I must be uninformed. And then if there is a breakup, then when I have to deal with somebody else, they're doing misunderstanding. Does that make sense? Or does something kind of break that argument?
That's a great point. So basically here you can view what we're doing as the trading protocol is a way to commit ex ante to showing your trading record or not to the public, right? And basically what we're saying is that ex ante, even the hedger wants to commit not to disclose the trading record. And that's for the reason that I explained. But that's a different question than ex post. As you say, if you're there and you had the technology to discuss credibly your trading record, right? Which you can imagine with blockchain or this kind of stuff. Well, then yes, the hedger will probably want to disclose their trading record because if they make a loss, they can be identified as hedger and they get good terms on trade, right? So here you would have some kind of unraveling argument, right? And so basically, the way we view that in the paper is that we say the trading protocol, if it keeps your record private, is a way for the hedger to commit to what they want to do, which is to keep their record private. But of course, if exposed, they can, somewhat disclose their trading record. They would maybe do so but that will hurt them, right? That will benefit them exposed, but that will hurt them ex ante, because ex ante, what they want to do is to commit, not to disclose. Yeah.
Thanks.
But that's a great point. Yes. Yeah, Charjan?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding this correctly, the reason that the relationship is better than spot trading is because there will be no otherwise there will be no the gains from trade cannot be realized if the liquidity trader made a gain in the first period with spot trading. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so that's true, but you have some extra you have some extra benefits. Yeah, that's true. But
there's some
yeah.
extra benefit, and that
Yeah.
depends on. There's basically like a discontinuity. Basically, the adverse selection is too strong when
Yeah.
the liquidity trader makes a gain, and if you assume that the liquidity trader's gains from trade is a continuous variable, then this discontinuity disappears. In the sense that, well, then what happens with the contract, with the relationship contract, is that the dealer says, well, if you made a gain in the first period, then I would improve your price relative to spot trading, but worsen the price relative to the spot trading if you made a gain. So then the trade-off is no longer clear. But so first, that's like one question to see if you have any comments.
Yeah.
And second is, if it is indeed a problem, I think there is another solution to that problem, which is what essentially the relationship trading is doing is the dealer is offering an insurance to the liquidity trader. Well, if you're lucky in the first period, I'll make you better off in the second period. But if you were unlucky in the first period, I'll make you worse off in the second period. So this is basically an insurance contract, which is beneficial if the liquidity trader has some risk aversion. That's a solution to. So even if the gains from trader was continuous, you can still capture the benefit of contracting with some risk aversion of the liquidity trader.
Okay, thanks, Charjan. So I think I will have to unpack this a bit. So
yeah.
On the continuity of the private benefit, I can see your point. I think John and I worked out a version where this was continuous before, and you still have a benefit of relationship in the sense that the cutoff at which you wanted to stop trading after a gain record was not exactly the same that was implemented by the spot case. So that you will still have this benefit from the relationship, I think. On the second point, to be honest, we can see that there's some kind of other implementation of the contract, right? With maybe an insurance type of contract, but I would have to think a bit more. Right now I can only give you an uneducated answer, but we will think about it, for sure. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the implications. And so Andreas, I guess I'm out of the 45 minutes, but I have a few slides here. So should I go through them for the implications?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is common. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, just to wrap up, so in our model, the client has a trading record that leads to personalized prices, and that's actually a benefit for liquidity-driven clients. And we view the relationship with the dealer as a way to keep your record private, right? Which is beneficial for the hedger. So we have a set of implications, as I mentioned in the introduction. I just want to focus on two of them here, so number 2 and 3, which are relationship discounts and the implications for trading protocols. Okay. Okay. So the way we view it is that we have relationship discounts in the time series or in the cross section. So what do we see in the data is that if you trade more often with a certain dealer, you tend to get better prices, right? So lower spreads. So here in the time series, what do we mean? First, we see that if you trade with the same dealer, so if you trade with a relationship dealer, you get tighter spreads at day 2 than at day 1, right? So and in a sense, in our model, this is coming from the fact that the high spread that you pay at day 1 is some kind of investment in the relationship in exchange for the lower spread at day 2. relative to spot trading, right? And the cross section, well, this is just the fact that in our model, the client in a relationship gets tighter spread than even the competitive spread that is charged by outside dealers, right? So that will be consistent with what we get in the data. Another thing that's not on the slide, but because I just thought about it before the seminar, is that in a sense what we also get is that the clients that get tighter spreads at day two are those who make a loss, and that's those for which the dealer actually benefits, right? So we often see that clients who bring more profit to the dealer are actually those who get the tighter spread. So in a sense, we can also get this. At a high level, what I want to emphasize is, maybe not surprising to you, is that price discrimination and price dispersion, which is often seen as a measure of inefficiency due to lack of competition, in our model, it's actually something that is beneficial to liquidity-driven clients, right? Because it happens for different reasons.
Sorry, can I just jump in here for a moment?
Yeah.
Because I think you have to be a little cautious, right? So in your particular model, you have a commitment contract effectively that from the dealer side, and this contract is made under competition, right?
Yeah.
So as I pointed out, as I said, right? So if you didn't have this commitment, then the dealer would actually explicitly exploit and fully extract all the surplus from the hedger, which would lead to wider spreads in some form, right? And so I think in an empirical work, this can be very difficult to disentangle. So, in the case that I say where you can't commit, there is lack of competition essentially because your hedger cannot easily go to another party and receive a better deal, right? So that I think there's a possibility that there will be no trade or that will be even wider spreads charged or similar spreads being charged.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is I think you should at least work out what would be the implication if there's no commitment and what would that mean for the spread and does the result hold there?
Okay. No, that's a good point. So I agree with you. So what I can say is that if you remove commitment, it changed quite a bit because you have this information order problem that you describe. And so there, I guess what you would do is that a bit what's going on in Josh's paper, I suppose, is that you'll have some kind of trade-off between competition, like getting offers from more dealers versus making your trading records a bit more public, right? So I suspect that we'll have that. So we have not worked this out. So what I can just tell you is that if you just shut down commitment from the dealer, but you trade only with one dealer, then basically relationship can still be better than spot trading, but this thing about private versus public record can change. So the point is well taken, and I agree with you that when it comes to taking it to the data, we have to be a bit more cautious, but we need a bit more work on this to give a fully satisfying answer. Yeah. So in terms of trading protocols, this is a bit what I said in the introduction. So as you know, like electronic bond trading is mostly done via request for quote, RFQ, which is a one-sided trade request. You said either that you want to buy or you want to sell to dealers that you solicit for an auctions, right? And then these dealers compete for your trade. And our simple point is that, basically when you do that, you reveal the trade direction to every dealer that you solicit, right? And from the trade direction, with the timestamp and the price movements that everybody can observe, it's not that hard to reconstruct the trading record of the client and to know whether the trade was informed or not, right? And so here, what we basically say is that in our model, the client's preference for privacy can explain a number of patterns. So we're not saying that we're the only one to be able to explain each pattern in isolation, but we think we have a simple model to explain several patterns at the same time. Xiaojun, for example, has a paper who explains that clients contact few dealers in RFQs based on a different mechanism. Here we can explain also why the clients contact not only few dealers in RFQs, but the same dealers across auctions because of this relationship benefit. Of course, when you have a regulation that imposes a minimum number of bids, that can be harmful because it can force disclosure of your trading record to more dealers, which is not something that you might want. And then we know, as I said, that this request for market protocol becomes more popular. This is a protocol in which you basically say, I want to trade an asset. I'm not telling you whether I want to buy or to sell. I want you to make a market for me. And according to our framework, this is kind of optimal because you get both competition from dealers, and at the same time, only the winning bidders knows your record. Of course, that's subject to the caveat that we discussed with Andreas, that if you remove any form of commitment from dealers, that might be a bit of an issue. But that's kind of what we can get. So we have other applications in the paper, but let me conclude in the interest of time. So basically, we have a theory of relationship trading in OTC markets where relationships have value even if you have a competitive market. And in that theory, the dealers act as the record keepers of their clients. We have a number of implications that I went through. And a bit more speculative, something that we discussed a bit with Josh here is that it's not the case yet, but you could imagine a world in which clients get some kind of ownership of their trading records. Actually, this is something that is discussed in banking where, customers could get ownership of their data. What we're saying is that the ownership by clients might not be desirable. And the reason is exactly the unraveling logic we discussed with Josh, which is that, exposed, if you have a good record, you made the loss, you want to show it to the dealers, but exempted, that might actually harm you. Okay. So thank you very much for your comments and your feedback. I hope that John could take some notes. I took some notes, but I hope that John could take some notes online. Thank you very much. And as I said, I'm happy to stay a bit more if there's any more question.
Well, thank you so much, Vincent. So we have a few more minutes for questions. So everybody, go ahead.
First of all, thanks everybody for the comments. I'm very happy to hear all your thoughts. Thanks.
All right, Xiaoyun, you have a question.
Yeah, so I think John added a response in the chat that I didn't understand, that about the spread discrimination is getting larger, which benefits the hedger part. Why is the spread discrimination also getting larger with relationship trading?
So this is this slide. So I'm not responsible for what John is saying because it's 11 p.m. for John and he had 6 hours of teaching today. So that's the disclaimer. So I guess what I'm just saying is that you have the spread discrimination, S2G minus S2L, which is basically the fact that you pay more if you make a gain than if you make a loss in terms of spread.
Yeah.
If you do spot trading, that's just basically
something.
that's just something that's just set, like exposed.
Right.
And if you do relationship trading, you can set it as part of the contract. That's kind of the idea, right? And so basically, because you can set it as part of the contract, what we show is that you can widen the spread difference, basically here to 2 sigma, which is larger than the spread difference that you would get in the spot market. So this is in the sense that you make a more efficient use of the trading record of the client than if the client were to trade spot.
So if in the state 2G, the spread is actually going to be worse than the spot trading. It's going to be larger.
Yeah. So the point is that here, because the client doesn't have commitment, right? You still need to make sure that they will want to trade, right? So basically, what you have here is that you charge a pretty large spread at date 1, and then exposed at date 2, like what matters is really the spread difference, not so much the level, right? Yeah.
Got it. Understood.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
I see. Thanks.
Josh, you had a question, maybe, I think, or no? Sorry, I'm Sinuston.
He was applauding. It looked like that.
I see.
All right. Well, if there are no further questions, then I want to thank everybody who sat through the session for coming, and we see each other again in 2 weeks from now. Thanks, everyone, and thank you so much for your presentation, and also John for coming and providing additional comments on the questions that people made. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.